What's going on, everyone? Chris here with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal. So we just got done giving an estimate for a garage clean out that was actually for a repeat client, but a repeat client that I did like my first year of junk removal. So like I still had the U-Hauls, I kept a clean shaved face so I didn't have a beard, and I didn't recognize his last name because he wasn't in my invoice app because he had a paper invoice. Back then I used to do paper invoices, so I really just didn't know. But as I was walking up to the door, I was like, this all looks really familiar. And then when I saw him, I was like, you look familiar too. And he was like, oh, you've been here before. And I was like, I think I have. So that was pretty cool. But I'll throw up some pictures on the screen. I basically quoted about $1,200, so 2 full loads with some bagging fees and stuff, and then a repeat client discount. He said he really liked me the first time I was there, so he was looking forward to using me again. And he was super cool with the price, completely understandable about how it works and whatnot. But I guess his brother talked to the realtor because they're splitting the cost, and the realtor was like, yeah, I have someone who can do everything. They'll clean out the garage, they'll bring stuff to consignment, they'll clean the inside of the house, like actually clean, and they'll do some other stuff. But the realtor said, although she is expensive and she's very blunt, and like the guy just lost his mom, like he doesn't want somebody there who's blunt. But he told me, he said, I have a feeling I'm going to end up calling you because we know other people that can do the other services. So we'll see what happens. But that would be like within the next couple of days. So it'd be cool if we get the job. There's actually a lot of resell potential in there. One of the pieces specifically we were both talking about, and I was telling him about like how my mom and dad did antiques, and I told him some stories. That's how I like to connect with customers. Like, I don't like to sit there and bullshit about other people. I like to bring up relatable stories that can connect me with the client, and that helps build rapport, and that usually helps sell the job as well and builds a repeat client. But we'll see what happens. I wanted to talk on something. I've done similar videos in the past, but this came up in my networking group chat last night, and it was mistakes that you make as a business owner, whether you're first starting off or just in general. And I think it's important to talk about because it's not something that's often spoken of. It's, everything social media, you're portraying the highs of business, the highs of lifestyle, the highs of, everything that you do, because that's what engages people. People want to see, oh, I can make $1,000 a day with just my pickup truck. All I have to do is post on Nextdoor and Facebook and Craigslist and go pick up stuff and go drop it off and resell it. That's easy. Why doesn't everybody do it? Because it's not always fucking easy. That's why. And not a lot of people will talk about the negatives. And I've always talked about the negatives because I think it's important and more realistic, because people get into this expecting it to be easy, and it's not. And sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes you can do everything that everybody told you to do, and it doesn't quite work out the same. And like, you're stuck wondering like, well, why am I failing? And sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's location, sometimes it's you, it's hard to decide those things. So I like to resonate on these topics every now and then. So we were talking about it last night, and I was thinking in my head on the way home about some of the things that like quickly enter my mind. And some of them are still going on to this day. And some of them have affected me up until 6 months ago. And some of them I've corrected. But I want to talk about just some of the few ones that, really stick out to me. And my intention is that as you continue on with business, whether you're first starting or you've been in it for a while, something I mentioned, maybe you have had something similar happen. Maybe it's happening right now, or maybe it will happen in the future. And it's just giving you a little bit of an insight to think, oh shoot, clutter reduction had to deal with that. Let me try to avoid this mistake, or let me try to work through this mistake with better intention versus just winging it, because it may cost me more in the future. So I have 4-ish mistakes. One of them has like a second part to it, but they're pretty generalized. It's not like I, screwed up and crashed my truck and, had a massive lawsuit or something, but they're more just overall operation errors. So the first one is trying to do too much at first, whether that's trying to add on extra services just to pull in income, or targeting too large of an area. I think you should stick to what you really want to focus on for your business If you want to do something else on the side to make some extra money so you don't have to rely on your business, I think that's a better idea. But I think the more you can focus in on one thing, you can put all of your effort into it and it comes out with better results. And then targeting too large of an area, I've learned over time that I see better results when I focus on my local city in small increments and I expand over time versus trying to catch my whole county. I have 1.6 million people in my county. In my city alone, I have 157,000 people. If I try to reach all 1.6 million people, that's a lot of grounded coverage. That's a lot of wasted money on a lot of people who have no idea what junk removal is and don't need it. But if I can focus on just my city, get to know my community, the best areas to market to, the best audience, and the best demographic, I can focus on that alone, which is much less stressful. I can put much more time into it. And not only am I putting time into it, but I'm putting more focused and better time into it versus just trying to guesswork all around. So I have learned over time to try not to do too much, try to focus on the small stuff and expand. The next thing is, in the beginning, I was too quick to lower the price, whether I thought it was too much in general or based on the fact I was judging the person based on our conversations. So, for example, I came from the moving industry. It's all time-based, and I understood the cost of it because there's a lot that goes into it that most people don't see. They just see you removing stuff from your house and driving in and dropping off to the next place. There's a lot of shit that goes on in between, though, that people don't think about. There's a lot of risk, a lot of liability. There's a struggle. You have 400-pound arm bars coming down a spiral staircase, and not everybody that you have on your team is as well trained as the guys who brought it up. So sometimes you're in a real pickle, and I understood those costs. But for junk removal, people don't see the same reflection. Even though you're moving, you're just moving from point A to wherever. You're not having to go back, and there's no care in the items. I can drag a couch out of the house as long as I'm not scratching the floor. Nobody cares. But for the moving, you can't do that. You don't want to damage a couch. So it was hard to justify that, like, I could relocate a one-bedroom apartment in 4.5 hours and charge them $500 because I'm charging by the hour, especially if I'm doing it solo. I could go in and do a clean out for that same apartment and charge them $1,400 because it takes up 2 trucks. The price doesn't make sense. Why would you pay more for a service that requires less? So in the beginning, I was always very uncomfortable, not so much about pricing jobs. That came to me pretty easily, especially like estimating volume and stuff. But to justify what I was doing for the cost it was hard to get past that confidence like layer. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, whether you know it or not. And I also, like, as I'm talking to a customer just in general before we even get to pricing, that's usually the last thing. Like, I might be talking to someone and they're telling me, oh man, I just spent like $7,000, putting down new sod in my backyard because it was dying out and the HOA was complaining and, it's such a bullshit charge and blah, blah, blah. And then here I come and say, yeah, so I can clean out your garage. It's going to be $1,500. It's freaking 15-20% of your sod. That was a much larger service. You're already complaining about that. In my head, I'm like, well, shit, he's not going to want to pay $1,500 for trash. So automatically in my mind, I'm like, okay, let's drop it down to like $1,000 or $1,200. And I have no idea if he would have gone with that or not. He might just be complaining because he's complaining, because people who don't want to spend money complain about money being spent. But he may have been fine with the junk removal. Maybe he had another quote from 1-800-GOT-JUNK that was $1,900, and my $1,500 would have been fine. But instead, I'm automatically lowballing myself without even knowing what he's going to react to. So those were things that took me a while to get over. And I think you just have to understand that this is the industry standard. If people are paying the franchises it, they're going to pay you for it. You might filter out some of your cheap customers, which every service has it, but you will get jobs over time and people will book just based on the service at hand. So that's something that took some time. The next thing was delaying getting a truck. So if you don't know, my first 2-ish years, I used U-Hauls for all of my trucks. And I only used U-Hauls because it was more versatile and easier for me in my situation. There's other options out there, but I used U-Hauls. And I didn't know what I wanted to do vehicle wise. I didn't want to get a pickup truck because I knew they were expensive, and I didn't want to do a truck and trailer combo because driving the moving trucks or 26 feet trucks all together, including front to end, it's like 33, 34 feet in length. It's hard to get in tight spaces. You often get into situations where you're like borderline about to hit something and you have to like readjust, and it gets tricky. And I didn't want to do that with a truck and trailer. I've never driven a truck and trailer. I know that they can be dangerous. I know you can overload it. I know there's a lot to consider. You now have two vessels you have to pay insurance and the fees on. And it just wasn't something I necessarily wanted. And that was an option, but I put that shit off for like 6 months. And I was more so considering a box truck, like a 14 to 16 foot box truck, high ceiling. And I wanted to do that for a while. And, the financing and leasing options were just too high to really, appreciate. And I ended up with a truck and trailer. But in reality, I wish I had gotten a truck earlier because I could have used the truck for small deliveries to help offset the cost. I could have used it for smaller junk jobs and maybe put like sides on it like my helper has to handle up to like a quarter load worth of what my trailer would be. And then if I had a bigger job, then go get a U-Haul. But that would have helped offset a lot of costs. It would have saved me a lot of money in general. And I think that just would have been a better route to take. Plus, it would have motivated me to get a trailer earlier on and be more comfortable with driving it. And that could have helped with truck branding and marketing in general. And it would have saved a lot of time and cost. And then the last thing, which kind of has two parts to it, this I think is universally the most important topic. And I think most people screw up in this situation, whether they talk about it or not, because it is still a little bit of a taboo topic. And that is finances. So when it comes to my personal finances, I'm pretty organized and I'm very well aware of how much I'm spending each month in different categories, how much I'm investing, how much I'm saving, how much I'm doing this and that, all that stuff, right? Pretty good in that field. But when it came to business, there was a lot of moving parts that, first of all, there's a lot of things that you don't even know exist until they come up. There's a lot of fees and taxes and fines that I received that I didn't even know were there until they came, which is kind of bullshit. But there's bigger costs. There's more liability and risk that happens if something goes wrong and you have to pay large chunks of money for it. And it's a different ballgame from your personal expenses. You can organize it the same way, but there's different rules you have to play by, especially with taxes. So it was hard to understand that until it happened. And I wish I had spent more time in the beginning learning more about what I should expect and how to set aside money to handle that. And, kind of starting off, I was absorbing all this other information from Reddit and Google. I wasn't on YouTube as much actually until later on. But, eventually YouTube, and everyone says, oh, do this, do that, get this marketing material, try Google Ads, do Facebook, do Craigslist, do whatever, and try to market to all these different people, buy this kind of marketing material, present yourself well, buy uniforms, have a branded truck. It's a lot of stuff that adds up in cost that people don't think about. And if you're just trying to do everything because that's what you're told to do, that can be really freaking expensive and it gets up there fast. But the problem, more so than that, is if you don't have the income surplus coming in, you're going to dig yourself a hole. And what my experience was, truthfully, was I would do all this stuff and then my next month would be really fucking slow. And guess what? I have no income coming in. I have all these expenses. Guess where it goes? Nice little plastic rectangular card. And I'd say, okay, I'll handle this the next month when I have a better month and I'll allocate more money towards it. But guess what? If you don't have a good month, or you have a decent month but not enough to pay down that extra fees, it keeps piling up. And that is a tough spot to be in because all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's manageable. It's a few hundred, maybe it's 1,000. I can handle that. I can allocate more percent towards it. And, I'll make up for it over time. But let's say, boom, here comes a big fine. Maybe you get charged $400 for something. Or, oh, here comes commercial auto insurance and all these bills all pile up at the same time. And all of a sudden you're in the second month and now you have $1,800 there because you have your bills plus those expenses, right? All that marketing you didn't quite kick in yet. Maybe you get a job here and there, but not enough to pay it off. That's where I think you have to be as frugal as possible in the beginning. Get all your stuff from similar sources or cheap sources that are still decent quality, and really stick to the bare basics, and don't get the specialty stuff until you have the surplus to handle it. And you really just have to nickel and dime stuff, and then strictly use your profit to then pay for that stuff. And that, I think, is a hard decision to come up on, because in your mind you're like, well, shoot, I just opened this business, like I need to make money, I need to go out and do all this stuff. Doing all that stuff costs money, whether you know it or not. And you need to be prepared for that. And it's hard to manage the money for something like that when there's so many moving parts, especially parts that you're unfamiliar with if this is your first business. I struggled with that up until like 6 months ago. I am now managing past error. And it took me, like, I spent all of 2023 managing debt. I won't say how much, it's not fucking extravagant, but I spent 2023 sending off slightly higher percentages than I used to pay down debt. The only good thing about it is that your interest payments and debt repayment are tax write-offs. But other than that, obviously that takes a pull from your overall profit to go buy more equipment, to buy better equipment, to pay yourself more money. And that's tough. And I think it's a learning curve that everybody's going to deal with one way or another. I know somebody, I won't say who they are, but he used to brag to me about how much money he made. He was doing like $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And I eventually talked to him like on a later time, and he said, he's like, yeah, man, I got like $30,000 or $40,000 in debt on my credit card at any given time. Like, I just kind of throw it over there, and when I have a big month, I just pay it down. And I'm like, okay, but in that case, you're actually not really doing that well then, because you're constantly at a negative. And some people think, debt and leverage and business and it's going to come. I don't know. I don't like having that kind of debt though. And it wasn't that high for me, but it's enough that I'm always stressed about it. So I just think that's something that you need to be prepared to run into, and you need to have stuff set aside for any given situation. So just something to keep in mind, food for thought, and take it with a grain of salt. But then the next thing is acting like because it was a tax write-off, it was okay to spend money on. This is another big one, very similar to the first point I just made. So everybody and their mother would tell you, oh, next time you go out to dinner, the moment business comes up in conversation, boom, pay with your business card, because now it's a business meal, because you can write it off as, oh, well, we discussed business for more than 50% of the time. And now you can write off 50 to 100% depending on the year. They keep changing it. And you can write off that meal. And now you don't have to pay out of pocket for it. And it's just going to help keep taxes away from you. Or, oh, you need a better tool. You need more equipment. Just go buy it. It's a tax write-off. It's used for your business. Oh, you want to go do a Grant Cardone $10,000 course? All right, well, just put it on your business card. It's education. The problem with doing all that stuff, yes, it's technically true to a degree. Some people really take advantage of that. But it's true to a degree. But the problem is that you still need the money to pay for that. It's a tax write-off, but you're still fucking paying for it. You're just not being taxed on it later on. So that's something that I think, like, I definitely got carried away with it a few times here and there. And it just doesn't strike you because you're doing small increments every single day. And like, you have these jobs coming in that are 10, 20 times as much. So you don't think about it, but it adds up. And if you're not on top of it, it'll hit you in the butt. So I think that you really just need to stick to what you need. And when you're at a point where you're making like $100,000 profit every year, pure profit, like it's just extra money sitting in the bank, has nowhere to go. Maybe you don't want to pay yourself more because then you get taxed in a higher bracket, whatever. You just have all that extra money. That's when you start getting new trucks. You start getting better equipment, better tools. You start reinvesting into the business to make things more efficient and better and faster and easier. Because now, if you just leave that money there, you're going to get taxed on it 100%. So that's when it should come up and play. And I'm not an accountant. I'm just based on what I've learned. But that's what I wish I had focused more on up until this day, honestly. It wasn't until like 4 months ago, basically like the start of this year, I was like, okay, we're going to back off of everything, stick to what I need. I needed the double axle trailer because I was having weight problems. But other than that, though, I haven't gotten anything new. I haven't been going out using my card for, much stuff. So that's just something that I've learned to overcome. And I think that's something a lot of people don't talk about. And I think that's something that actually screws most people up the most, more than anything. And it's a taboo topic to talk about. So, it is what it is. But that's it for me. We're going to head off and run a few errands. And I got to stop by stores because we have some people picking up some stuff later. And this lady wants me to go pick up a bunk bed. I have to take it apart and bring it back to her house, which this place is like 40 minutes away, there and back. She wanted to pay me $100 for the whole process. And I was like, look, if I was just going to pick up a single item, quick load, I would do it for $100 because you're a neighbor. But I'm going to charge you an hourly rate because I am now under two other people's time, traffic and the person at the next house. I also don't know the quality of the bed. I've taken those things apart numerous times as a mover. Sometimes they're a pain in the ass. The screws are stripped. Something's broken. I don't want to be responsible for that. So I told her I'm going to charge you from the moment I leave my house until I get there, do the job, come back to your house to drop it off, and then that's when I'll stop the clock. And it's a lot more than $100. So she hasn't responded yet, and I don't think she's going to. So screw it. We'll move on. But yeah, that's it. So do me a favor and comment down below at least one mistake you've made, whether it's on my list or not, that you can be truthful about, that you think could help somebody else to prevent them from running into the same situation. But that's it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.